Grow your practice, grow your wealth, grow your impact. Find out how to spend less time in the dental chair and more time on the things you love.
Welcome back to the Dental Wealth Podcast. Glad to have you back for another episode. Glad to have Matthew back in the studio with me again.
Back in the studio.
Matthew has a stack of papers in front of him, and I told him, I said, don't tell me what you want to talk about. And so I have no idea what he's about to ask me. So this will be like...
I have the keys to the castle. I have the keys to the kingdom.
The keys to the kingdom. All right, so here we are. We're a few weeks outside of the end of the year. Recording this is not when you'll listen to it. You'll probably listen to this somewhere.
Yeah, right the week before Christmas, I believe. Yeah.
So, what do you got, Matthew?
So, first and foremost, thank you guys for listening in. Like and subscribe as always. We're getting a lot of great feedback, so I just want to reiterate that. We just had a large workshop, and we had one of the podcast listeners. He actually attended, and he actually followed one of the things that you were telling him, and it said, share the information. And he got a copy of Financial Evolution and sent it to a friend to read. So I wanted to go ahead and give him props. He knows who he is. Thank you for listening. That's what we want you guys to do. We want you to share the information first and foremost because, we're only just two guys talking up here. As long as we get some listeners, that's what we're aiming for. So we do want to give a shout out for him. So like and subscribe. A lot of listeners,
by the way.
Yes.
A lot of listeners.
We got a lot of listeners. And we appreciate everything. So before I get into anything, I was reading an article. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. I was reading how to win out in saturated markets every time. So a lot of times when I get on the phone and people call in, they try to use their environment necessarily as a cause for why they haven't been able to do what they've done. They're struggling a little bit because the environment. We have so many dental practices in the area. And I love that. And I always refer back to the story about your practice. And how it's basically on Dental Row at this point. There's dentists everywhere, and you guys still average over 100 new patients per month. And I think it's what they were saying in the article was there's three things. And the first one, it looks better. And they were saying basically how people buy from what they what they see as something that is, I guess, makes them feel like they're in an upper category. And I think in a dental practice, that's an easy thing to accomplish.
So there's a statistic in business, and the statistic is this, and I want you to write this down if you're somewhere where you can write. And the statistic is that 20% of people always want to buy the VIP service. They always want the best of the best. So if you have a car, for instance, so if you're a car company, if you're Ford, if you're maybe even we use Mercedes or we use, a luxury car maker, we would say that even though your Mercedes, only realize that 20% will buy your S-Class. And interestingly enough, that if you make the special edition S-Class, then you'll get 20% of the people that buy the S-Class. Now, watch this, by the way. You see this with like Land Rover. So Range Rover, there's like this one, I think it's autobiographical, whatever it is. There's an edition. Someone's listening right now going, that's not what it's called. Yeah. But anyhow. I have that, but it's not what it's called. So it's a special edition. And so what happens is if you think about this, so when we go back down to the luxury car market, we would say the same thing. It's oversaturated. Yeah. And we would argue that there's a lot of different cars out there. But see, what ends up happening is, and going back down to that point, is that we do realize that there's still a certain segment of the population that will buy the best of the best. Mm-hmm. Whenever there's a best of the best, they want to be, and the reason why goes actually to something called social capital, which I've talked about in this podcast before. They want to be able to sit around with their friends and go, oh, you go there? Well, I go here. Mm-hmm. And at that place, we get blah, 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 blah. Or you have the regular Range Rover. I have the special edition with vibrating seats that make you breakfast or whatever. And so what we want to do is people want to sound interesting. So they want to be able to be that 20% to say, oh, you sit down with the common people. I'm in the crown room and I'm having a cocktail.
Yes.
They say for free while you're down there in your little crowded seats. Okay. I'm in first class while you're sitting back in coach. So what ends up happening now, even the airlines know this, that
they can charge more.
There's a lot of people who won't buy buy first class. But however, 20% will. And then if you have even a higher first class, if you have the luxury class or, whatever, you'll always be able to find that segment. So that going back to that when we look at dental, we would do the same thing. We would say, okay, how do we then in that marketplace, by the way, that's one strategy.
Yeah,
You
and
could
I think
actually
it's
take the other
important
side.
because more recently, a lot of the phone calls that I've had is I feel like in 2020, dentists figured out who they want to be. And I say that from, the last several phone calls that I've had, they've all said that they, in 2021, they want to start seeing the patients they want to see. They want to become more of a high-end dental practice, and they're starting to figure out which clientele they want to. So this directly correlates with how do you become that? Because you're trying to compete in a marketplace where there's hundreds of people that are trying to do that. So how do you stand out? And I think one of the things is, do you look better? When we tell someone that comes back to us and we say, all right, it's time to update your office, and they give a little bit of pushback and they say, I don't know if I want to do that. I'd rather go spend it here. No, it's everything. People are always looking at you. They're looking to see, one of the first things I do when I go on Google and I look between two companies is I look at pictures and I say, is this company better than this company? They have great reviews, but would I rather go to a Mercedes dealership that has 4.4 stars or a Ford dealership that has 4.4 stars? I start looking at things, and I start looking at, does it look better? Yes, it does look better. And I think that was, one of the points that it made in here. The second part was, does it work better? Is it more efficient? It said, this comes down to customer trust. If a customer knows they can trust your product, they'll choose it every time. So
what I would do is if I'm looking at the marketplace, what I would do is I would look at and say, okay, let's draw a grid and say what's average. So when you walk in the front door, what's the average experience? What are the average procedures? What is the average team paid? What does the average team look like? I would figure out exactly what those things are. And then what I would do is I would first of all find the most cost-efficient ways to do that. But I would start to say, how do I then differentiate from the average experience? It's interesting. I can walk into a dental practice and make one change and grow revenues. And what I'm saying is one change in experience based on that is because the fact that everybody looks around at what everyone else is doing. And once they see what everyone else is doing, they don't say, how do I do it different? They say, how do I do it the same? How do I make... So what ends up happening is I would argue the average dental practice is trying to be that average. They don't want average results. They don't want average revenue, but they're acting in an average way. And they're average thinking and an average management versus sitting down and go, how do we make this so damn unique that even if I had 20 dental practices on this road, and like you said, I've done this. Like this is not something like that I don't understand. Not only have I done it for thousands of clients, but I've done it for myself. And so when we look at this, we just simply say, look, quit looking at what everybody else is doing and start looking at what you can do that's different than everybody else. Then we walk in, going back to the second point, and say, okay, but when we walk in, then what can I count on? So can I count on the phone being answered honestly a certain way? Can I count on being treated a certain way consistently? As a matter of fact, one of the things that when you bring that up is fast food and restaurant industries have figured this part out. Because what would happen if you went to Starbucks and every time you got a cup of coffee, it was different? And it tasted one way, at one location, a different way at a different location. One of them had this type of food. The other one
trust the brand. You'd be like, I don't know what I'm going to get.
I don't know what I'm going to get. And so it's a great point to say, well, you can look. So so this actually happened to me this morning. It's funny you bring this up. Like I said, I didn't know what you were going to talk about. But so we're driving down the road. I had a doctor's appointment this morning, and I was thinking about where do I get a cup of coffee, because I had passed a Starbucks. And so I was going into a very high-end part into Buckhead, which is a high-end part of Atlanta. And I click in my phone coffee, and I get all these names. And who do you think I was going for first? Well, Starbucks. Only because consistently I know what I'm going to get. And because I know what I'm going to get. Now, by the way, there might be some cute boutique-y little coffee place that has better coffee, better service. But because of the fact that I knowingly, when I walk into Starbucks, I know what the experience is going to be like. I know what the taste is going to be. I know what food they're going to have offer. There is something about that consistency that makes me want to go there. And we think about dental operations. We think, well, we're always consistent.
Mm-hmm.
Well, are you? If we took 100 patients and we had them walk through your experience, would those 100 people, and by the way, in 6 months, is it the same experience? In 4 years, and by the way, it should be getting better, but is there consistency around that I know what's going to happen every single time? Is there a different person up front every time? Is there a different way we check out every time? Is there a different, we started to realize that consistency matters.
Yeah, and I mean, it uses the terminology seamless experience in this part, and I think that touches on it. I mean, it gives an example of if an app is too slow or a Zippier is hard to zip, consumers will stay away and tell their friends to stay away too. And I think that touches.
So let me give you a dental office. So you walk up to checkout. Let's just play this scenario really quick, Matthew. So you walk up to checkout. So you just go to the dentist you like, you trust, and then you get a checkout. And then before you know, there's 4 people checking out. And you're sitting there with this piece of paper in your hand, right? And you're just waiting, right? And we've all been behind that person before.
We've all been there.
Hurry up. And you're like same thing at the drive-through line, right? We've all been behind that person like, what the hell are they ordering, right?
Yeah.
What are they doing up there? Like,
what is taking them so long?
Taking 12 minutes in the drive-through lane for them.
Yeah.
And by the way, that 12 minutes feels like an hour and a half,
exactly.
right? Well, the same thing happens at a dental office. If you're waiting behind that person to check out. See, one of the reasons why the practice I started still has 150 new patients, even going 2 decades in per month, is because of the fact it's that same thing of, for me, if there was a patient waiting, it would drive me insane, right? So it's like, why is that person waiting and just standing there? Because just like that drive-through line, when you're standing there in that line waiting to check out, how long does that time feel like? And it's crazy because the office can be beautiful. Everybody could have been amazing. It could have been a great visit. And when they stand there for 5 minutes waiting to check out, how upset do they become very quickly? And we, when we miss things like that, you say, is it a zipper? Anyone ever bought a new jacket? And the damn zipper won't work, and you're like, and especially like a high-end brand, and you're sitting there like I bought a barber jacket one time.
You're like, I paid for this, and this is what's going to happen. Same thing in a dental practice.
Well, I mean, I bought this barber, like, this is supposed to be a London, waxed, whatever, cotton,
made
jacket.
Out of Benda.
Right. And I go to zip this darn thing up, and I don't know what the English are doing with the zipper, but I mean, it takes you have to have some kind of decoding tool to zip this jacket up. And I'm like, I would never buy a barber jacket again. Now, someone's listening going like, I love my barber jacket. But that's the problem, is we have a consistency issue. Maybe it's just my zipper. But that jacket, the only thing I can think about that jacket is getting that zipper up is so hard. So going back to that thing, would I ever buy a barber jacket's $500? Would I ever go buy one again? No. Why? Because the zipper. Because it won't work consistently.
I was talking to a friend about this. We have there's a Chick-fil-A near us, and Chick-fil-A is known for their great experience. Well, this particular Chick-fil-A, they're still not letting people inside the actual restaurant itself. So what they did was they have the app, and we've talked about how they were thinking through the future, and we're like, we need to get this app together so that when people, if something like this happens, they can order online. Well, my experience with that Chick-fil-A has been where they've done it, it's different everywhere you go, and it's really hurt my perception on what Chick-fil-A is involved in. So when you order on the app, you order and it has a GPS location on it. So you put your food order in, and then you do curbside pickup. You go into this lane, and then you have to put the number in, and it says, what number space are you in? You put 5, and then they say, okay, prepping your meal. Well, it depends on each location. So this particular location near where I live, it takes 15 minutes when you're there to get a Chick-fil-A experience. And I'm paying for Chick-fil-A because I know it's good, but it's taking 15 minutes, which is not good. And then I could go to the Chick-fil-A that's down the street, and they have the same process, but it's twice as fast. And it's that seamlessness that if I were going to recommend a Chick-fil-A, for example, I would recommend the other one and not this one, even though that one is 2 minutes from my house and the other one's 10 minutes from my house. I'm going because it's more of a seamless experience at the other one compared to the one that's closer to me.
Well, and then there's Whole Foods, which I will tell you, the day before Thanksgiving, like that night, what that looks like at a grocery store.
And you actually went into the grocery
store?
No,
I didn't. Like, this is the experience. So,
didn't expect that.
So I needed some things, and so I go into Whole Foods app, the Prime Now app.
Yeah.
And I put in the things, and it says you can pull into a spot because, of course, there was no delivery left. And so I pull into the spot. I have to tell you, it is a torrential downpour. Like I was like, thank gosh, this is how I chose to do this. And so I get there, and we're in this downpour, and when I go in there, I literally I pull in this spot, and they come out. And they're like loading this stuff into my car in the torrential downpour. I'm like looking for my cash so I can make sure I tip them for this.
I feel bad.
And I can feel bad, right? But the fact is, because going back to that, the fact that in that environment, the busiest, probably we could say the busiest shopping day at a grocery store is probably the day before Thanksgiving. And in particular, the evening before Thanksgiving. And in a torrential downpour, the fact that they took care of me in that situation changed everything. And then we go back to consistency. For those of you who live in the Southeast, we have Publix supermarkets. I actually grew up in Lakeland, Florida, which is the home of Publix, and it's the largest chain in the Southeast. Well, talking about consistency. Well, all of a sudden it's interesting when I go to Publix, I order, like, if I get milk and eggs, it's $182. But I can go to Whole Foods and for the same thing, get a gigantic cart. So I'm like, what is happening with consistency and pricing? Same thing. It's like,
if it keeps fluctuating,
it keeps fluctuating. So then you get frustrated because you're like, hold on. How did I just walk out of here with like a sub and it's $180? So pricing can also be something to consider. If the pricing is fluctuating that much in the modeling, that it's like, well, now I'm starting to look at substitutes because I'm starting to say, well, if Whole Foods will come out in the rain to my car in the torrential downpour the night before Thanksgiving,
there's not consistency there. You're like,
that's right.
Considering
so
it.
Then then Publix starts to go over time, like, what happened to our people? Well, what happened is you became inconsistent. And so what ends up happening as the model starts to become inconsistent, we start to make changes.
Yeah. And I think those are two, like, of the big ones. The last part is, so the first one was it looks better. So think of these things as your dental practice. Does it look better? Does it look the same as everybody else? Does it work better? Is it consistent? Is there a seamless process? And the last part is, and it's one thing that I've stressed with many of dental practice owners, and I know you've seen it, is it more convenient? And it says the number one thing is consumers also value their time. Companies offering convenience are taking over the world. There's articles that are saying this, that the convenience is taking over the world. That's why online shopping has blown up. The preference for convenience is what led to an increase in online shopping, and why you've seen Amazon be so successful is because their core strategy is to make things convenient for you. If you use the Amazon app, you literally just press buy now and it buys it if your car is already preloaded in there. Ordering things, 2-day shipping, everything's convenient. When I look at dental practices, I would say 99% of them are not convenient for the person, okay? They build their business model around what's convenient for them rather than what's convenient for the patients. And I say that from booking, calling in, when are the hours? And we always talk about, ways to increase capacity, what's convenient for me and you? Probably a Friday afternoon or a Friday morning before 8 a.m. Our dental practice is open during that time. No. They're not. And if you want to compete in a saturated market, so if you're calling in and saying, I want to be in this area, but there's a lot of dental practices, or I'm already in this area and there's a lot of dental practices and this is why I'm struggling, and I go on your website and number one, your website doesn't allow me to book online, or the hours are only 8 to 5, but you only see new patients between 9:30 and 1 o'clock, that's an issue for me. It's not convenient for me.
I think I think the question is really, how do I make it convenient? I think that's the better question, which is like, how do I make it convenient for my patients? I was at the doctor, I told you this morning, it was actually for my children. And so the doctor said to me afterwards, she said, can we do the next visit virtually? And I said, oh my gosh, please. I think what we have to look at is when we start to say, how do we compete? If you actually look at those things and say, let's review those and say, first of all, do I want to be in the 20%? Do I want to go up to the 20% club? Do I want to go after the people who are willing to spend more, because that's what I hear from doctors. I'm looking for those people who are willing to spend more, the people who care about their, but there's this contradiction, which is the contradiction is I want the people who want to pay out of network, but I don't want to give them an out of network experience. Now, Ford and Mercedes are not the same company. You get a different experience. First of all, if I take my company, if I had a Ford and I took it to the Ford dealership, and it's dirty. I'm going to get it back dirty.
Yep.
It's probably going to be dirtier than when I left it. Okay, you get a different experience with Ford. So the problem is you have to, if you want the 20%, then you have to provide a 20% experience. You have to create you have to handcraft your experience, like I've done with, in my own self.
Yeah.
And when I started dental practice, you have to create a unique experience that's different than everybody else if you want that 20%. Then that unique experience has to be consistent. Yep. And then you make sure that that's consistent. And then lastly, going back to that same thing, is to say, well, then how do I make it more convenient? Making scheduling more convenient, right? We all want to be able to pick up our phone and schedule our dental appointment. How do I make communicating? It's one of the things I said, people send these text reminders now about your appointment, but it doesn't give me the option to confirm right there, or it doesn't give me the option to change it. Yeah. How about the ability to change it right there? How about the ability to be able to go online and do virtual dentistry? No, you can't do. Yes, it is. There's so many times when we want to be able to get in to talk to somebody, and it's like I've got to take off a whole day of work. And then are the hours convenient? This idea of 8 to 5 is so antiquated. So how do I change my hours? How do I make it convenient? I was talking to someone recently. I was talking to a single mom with 3 children, and I was asking her about the dental experience, and she was like, I wish they had extended hours. There's no possible way I can do what I need to do and get into the dental appointment. Yeah. Why are our hours at 8 to 5? That doesn't make sense. Going back to convenience. It isn't always an app, though. I would argue that sometimes it's not an app. Sometimes it's something more simple. Like, why don't you open up hours to make it convenient for people to get in? Yeah. And by doing that, if we just take those things and say, okay, I will tell you, I'm not worried about anybody else. Like, I'll take a dental practice right now. If you ask me, Eric, take a dental practice and I want you to put it in the middle of 20 dental practices, I will kick their butts. Yeah. And the reason why is I'm willing to do what they won't. And I'm willing to make the experience. They're looking at each other, and I could give a damn less what they're doing. I'm going to walk in there and I'm going to blow them away, and I'm going to go get my 20% who are willing to pay more. I'm going to make sure that I have an experience that basically is consistent. Not basically, it is consistent, and I'm going to make it convenient. I'm going to make it hours that are convenient to get into, hours convenient to get out of. I'm going to add team members. I'm going to add so many things that what ends up happening is I know the average dentist won't compete with me. And because of that, what's going to end up happening is, because I'm in a sense become a substitute in their minds, whether it is or true or not, what ends up happening is they'll go, well, I don't want to go there. Now the 20% will go to me. They'll go, hold on, I could get all this and I'm only getting that. It's the same way with Publix. And I'm a Publix guy. I mean, I grew up, I went to George Jenkins High School, which is literally the founder of Publix. Like, it's like in our blood. And yet here I am saying I go to Whole Foods because of the fact that they made it so easy on me that literally, I'm telling you, I literally was like, oh my, you want me to go to the grocery store on Thanksgiving? This is going to be 10-hour experience. I didn't wait in line. I didn't have to go in. I literally hit a button.
I can put
and they came
everything in my cart.
That's
even
right.
on Publix, they have an Instacart, but you have to have an Instacart account in order to put stuff in the cart.
So then people have to go, right, Instacart's a pain in the butt, right?
It's like, make it inconvenient.
That's right. And so what ends up happening is we start to go like, look, now you might say, look, don't take this podcast and start trying to create some kind of a dental app, okay? That's not what we're saying here. I'll have somebody going, I listened to your podcast and
compete now in a saturated market.
What I'm trying to tell you is that what you need to do is go focus on literally those 1, 2, and 3 fundamentals. Yeah. And then don't rip off the Band-Aid and do them all overnight, but you need to start crafting it to start saying, quit doing the same damn experience as everyone else up the street. Because if you are, no matter how many times I tell dentists, they'll still do the same thing, then you're a commodity. If you're a commodity, you compete over price. If you compete over price, you lose.
And you won't get the patients you want.
That's right.
You say you want to be high end, you're not going to get those patients because you're doing that.
And so those are the key things, like focus on it. And I love the points of that article. But it's why I've never worried about a competitive marketplace. Yeah. And in fact, I kind of like a competitive marketplace because it keeps you from being complacent. Yeah. And you're, in fact, it's interesting. One time, before it was Dental Row, nobody was there. Yeah. And somebody asked me, they were like, Eric, you're everywhere. You market everywhere. You're on. I did it. We did a 5K where we raised money for the local schools. We were on the front of the football high school, planner. We were everywhere. Program. We were everywhere, and people used to say, like, "Why are you doing all this? You're already the top dental practice." And I said, the number one rule of business: if there isn't competition, there will be. Yeah. And I'm preparing for competition to come. Now, did they come? overwhelmingly,
Yeah.
because they were like, he knows something
Yeah.
back there. And I did. But ultimately speak, they came and they're still getting their butts whooped to this day,
Yeah.
because the fact is I'm willing to do what they want.
Yeah. And I think you just got to look at the marketplace. I mean, like you were saying, like we're using, business references. And one thing we want to try to do in the podcast is make sure we, use business terminology related to dentistry. So if you guys have an amazing experience somewhere and you find out like that a company is hitting these 3 points, figure out how you can kind of replicate those at your own dental practice, Don't just think about dentistry as a whole. Like, just write down, like, when you have a great experience, write down those 3 things that fall in the guideline of, does it look better? Does it work better? And is it more convenient? And start thinking of how you can do that in your dental practice. And I think that's why you were so successful, is you were looking at all these things. You were looking at, you say it time and time again, you were looking at your dental practice as a business rather than a dental practice.
That's right. So grab those things from this podcast, go put them in place, and start to say, like, look, this is why we say take this dental podcast and share it. Go sit down with your colleague and say, look, what happens when somebody walks into your door? I guarantee it's the same thing. What does your hygienist say when they walk out to greet a patient? I guarantee it's the same thing. And when it ends up happening, watch what ends up happening. You'll find you're a commodity, that you're doing the exact same thing as everybody else, hoping to get a different result. And that's not going to happen. And so what you do is you go back and you say, look, this is what we're going to do is let's strategically, you and I, work together, and let's do some things different over the next month and see what happens. I think you'll like the results. Hey guys, thanks for listening to another episode. Glad to have you back as always. And look, the Christmas is coming up.
Yep.
People should be feeling good. It's an amazing time for an amazing year. Hey, check us out on YouTube.
Yes.
Check us out on YouTube. Like, subscribe. Hey, be a part of it. Look, hey, I gotta beat you guys up a little bit. Get your butts on YouTube. I don't know why.
Reese has all these great ideas, and the production looks crazy. It's like, I'm like, wow, this looks so good.
Every episode, we have thousands and thousands and thousands of people listening to the Dental Wealth Podcast, but we can't get you over to YouTube. Do me a favor. Give me a Christmas gift. How about this? This is what I'm asking for Christmas. If you want to give me one gift, if you've enjoyed this podcast and you like this podcast, you're like, man, I love this stuff. I'm getting stuff every week. Do me a favor and give me a present back. Go on to YouTube and hit subscribe. Tell your friends about us, guys. Thank you very much.